As you can see from the thumbnail, we're doing something a bit different for this particular GT7 review. I'm actually reviewing two cars in one, the BMW 3.0 CSL, because there's a 1971 version and the 1973. So what we're doing in the video is I'm featuring the 1971 earlier model with the more kind of understated and classier shape and the less aero package, if you will. No motor swap yet on this one, so a pretty crucial difference there between the two. In standard form, literally just straight out of the box, and then comparing that to the special projects racing version, which I built on the 1973 car, to give you an idea of what it's like stock versus built, and also what are some of the key differences between the two cars, and if you're only going to buy one, which is probably the better option. But we can answer the last question first, because in my opinion, it's fairly clear which one is the best to go for. The 1973. It's the newer car, it has the better aero, it has better aero options, it has the motor swap option of the Z4, it's just across the board clearly the superior vehicle. In standard form though, they are different, and funnily enough, in stock form, the older car does have a key advantage. See, the older version is much lighter, but the newer version is more powerful. The power difference though isn't quite as impressive as the weight difference. So the 1971 shape weighs 1165 kilos, the 73 shape weighs 1250, so not far off 100 kilos difference. In terms of power, the older car has 177, the newer car has 202, so not a massive difference there, about 30, well in fact less than 30 horsepower difference. So 177, 1165 versus 202, 1250. Both front engine, rear wheel drive, naturally aspirated, the clue's in the name, both 3-litre cars, and although the point levels have definitely changed over time, this particular one of course that I've modified in special projects is way over 600 points, and in standard form, at least when I wrote down the specs, you were looking at about 407 on the older car and about 418 on the 1973. Now the older one has jumped up to 413, so presumably the newer one has as well. And again, in terms of pricing, I'm sure it's changed over time, but back when I made my notes of these vehicles, the older car was 141 grand and the newer one was 211. It is a little bit curious to me that these vehicles aren't in the legendary dealership. I don't really understand why they're not, because I have this theory that if we were to have the 2002 Turbo in the game, which if I recall is actually due to come back at some point, along with potentially, what was it, the 2000 or the 1600 or something like that, I feel like those would justifiably be Legends cars, at least the 2002 Turbo. And given this car's racing heritage and history and how iconic it is, especially the 73, I mean, why isn't this in the legendary dealer? It just doesn't really make sense to me. If something like a Citroen DS is in there, how can this not be? In terms of their actual performance, let's focus in on the standard form first. This is a weird one, because even a car like this, standard suspension, standard ride height, soft springs, no real reason to bottom out, it still doesn't get away with the ridiculous physics changes of the recent update, because even this, you can feel that happening when you turn into a corner, brake a little bit too late, or even just a little bit too hard. It feels like sometimes the car just locks up, starts going straight, even with the ABS on, and again, it's that same problem of the suspension ride height causing that issue. On the racing version, where it is lower, but I've got, a myriad of upgrades, including camber, much stiffer springs and dampers, etc., that thankfully does make a huge difference. Now, you will see in the video, the racing version, which I built, really doesn't like curbs, especially toward the end of the lap. It gets a bit bouncy if you clip a curb, but that's kind of par for the course with a race car. The long and the short of it is, if you're going to have one of these and use it, you probably would anyway, but I would strongly recommend modifying the car. And if you do plan to, as I have both versions, as I'm sure, to be honest, most players probably do anyway, you might want to consider doing what I've done. Keep one pretty much stock as more of a nice looking, classy collector's piece with very minimal visuals going on, and then have the other one as essentially what it is, a full-on race car. To me, that just kind of makes sense. You've got the best of both worlds. One of mine is still barely above 400 points, the other one is way over 600 and has that authentic, classic racing kind of vibe. It's, as I said, both ends of the spectrum, but also both really, really fun. You will also notice a drastic difference in terms of lap times, and in particular how long or how short of a time it takes to catch up to the cars ahead. As you would expect, of course, you're talking like, 15-20 seconds a lap difference, which is crazy given that they're not too dissimilar in standard form. It shows the vast gulf that tuning makes on a car in a very real sense. But yeah, these are charming vehicles which for some strange reason I've never been the biggest fan of myself. You would think I would be. They have a kind of vibe which I would love, more of a kind of vintage or classic GT sort of look to it. Super iconic, very good looking cars. I do really like the classic 6 Series, like the 635 Ci, I believe it was, from back in the day, that kind of shark shape. It's a great looking thing. For whatever reason, I just never really found myself using them that much until I built the special project, and the special project makes it a whole lot more fun. The long and the short of it is, if you're only going to buy one of them, I would argue fairly strongly that the 1973 is the car to go for. sure. It's got the better body kit, it's got the better aero, the roof spoiler, all kinds of stuff like that. Anyway, you've got the engine swap, which is a huge advantage if you're just looking for sheer outright performance, but even if you're looking to build it into a replica of some kind, be it what we've done here or even some different version, you can do that much more easily. The other car has a wide body, but it's not as extreme. It has the aero, but it's also not as big and as over the top. It just doesn't look as convincing as a racing version. So, like I said, you've got one that has the vintage, charming kind of feel, and the other which feels more like, you know, the homologation special kind of vibe. In terms of pricing though, well, like 400 grand or less will buy you both cars before you do anything to them, so it's not exactly like it's going to break the bank if you do buy both. If I recall, I seem to remember that you'll often see these at about the same time in the dealership. Yeah, you may as well get both if you can afford it. I'm sure many of you, if not most of you, already have, and I would be curious to know, if you do use these cars fairly often, which one do you prefer? Because maybe some people do prefer the 1971. I would imagine, for example, if you keep it standard engine to standard engine, well, if it's already lighter to begin with, then chances are you could probably keep the 71 version lighter across the board if you give it the full weight loss package as well. I can't say that for a fact, because like I said, I haven't actually done it, but it seems like that would track, given it's already an advantage to begin with. That's it overall for my advice and my thoughts on these two iconic classic Beamers, and of course I don't typically do two-in-one kind of reviews, but on this occasion I decided to do that for the same reason as back in GT Sport when I reviewed both versions of the Clio RS in the same one, because to me, in the older Gran Turismo games where you've got loads of duplicates, there are so many dupes in there that it kind of just washes over you at a certain point, whereas in the newer games, duplicates and unnecessary multiple versions of the same essential idea, which don't really bring anything new to the table, they are a bit more egregious to me. And even though some of them do have their fans, to me, when such a fuss is made about how long it takes to develop each and every car, it does beg the question of, well, okay then, why spend that time on something which is so similar to something we already have, rather than something entirely new, different, or unique, in other words. So that, in other words, is why I featured them both in the single video. Like I said, tell me your thoughts down below, and I'll see you in future for more reviews in GT7. It looks, unfortunately, like we're not getting anything in the form of an update this month. I did have a theory that it might be something to do with Forza Horizon 5 coming out early access this Friday. I am going to be beginning releasing content for that, and then of course in wide release on, what is it, the 29th next week. So it could have absolutely nothing to do with it, and it's CAS, so you never know. They could have something planned for the start of next month, which they sometimes do anyway, and it could be a complete coincidence, but I do find it a bit funny that it just so happens to be the exact time frame of when Forza's coming out, versus we've had a pretty consistent release of updates over months and months now, and now it's suddenly changed for this particular month. It could just be a coincidence, like I said, Nations Cup can affect things as well, blah blah blah, all of these variables, but that was just my thoughts. So like I said, stick around for more GT7, and stick around very, very soon for Forza Horizon 5, and for now, thanks for watching.